Today is our first snow day, which is the 16th of January. We've had quite a lot of snow overnight and it's still snowing now. 11 degrees in the flat today. I am properly dressed underneath this, but this is a great overlayer for just throwing over whatever you're wearing, and it makes such a huge difference. Despite the cold, I have an urge to make a summer dress. I completed a couple of commissions at the end of last year, making a top for a friend of mine, and I made her several of these. She gave me an old top about 4 years ago and said, I love this top, it was full of holes, like she'd really worn it in. Can you make it in other colours? I found a similar fabric, which was a nice light cotton jersey type fabric, really nice and soft, my ideal kind of fabric. And I drafted a pattern based on the original top, and I just keep that in stock, and every couple of years she asks me to make her a couple more because she wears them to death. So today I'm going to try and find the pattern, because it's a really nice easy wear top, and I think it will be really easy to draft into a dress pattern, a simple long tunic t-shirt dress. It's really nice and simple because although it has sleeves which come down to about there, but they're grafted into the pattern, so you don't need to faff around with extra patterns, which is great when you're a small business like mine, because what I might do is start making these to go into my Etsy shop and my Shopify store. So I'm just going to find what I've done with the pattern and have a look at how I can redraft that. So just give me a moment. So here's the pattern. That's the original top, which I've always kept as a kind of reminder. And this is the top. It's a really simple, it's 2 pieces. So this is half the back. And you can see it's got a bit of a slant on the waist, so it kind of bows like that. And then here's the front, and there's a cutout here because it has a little pocket, and it also has a V-neck front. What I think I'm going to do is remove some of this V-neck and just scoop that so that it's more like the back but a bit lower, and we're not going to bother with the pocket. But all I would need to do with this then is just make it longer, and it doesn't need to be that much longer either. I want to make it so it's like a just below the knee. I'm going to make this for me as a prototype, and then we'll see how it looks. Nice simple design to start with. I do all sorts of other dresses in simple designs. I have a nice asymmetric dress which I absolutely love, and I've made that in very long for evening. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and also in shorter for summer so that it drops just below the knee on one side. And I make them so that they're designed to be multi-fit. I don't make waistlines on my dresses, but they come with belts, and because I do them in really nice, soft, easy wear, stretchy viscose, elastin type fabrics, they drape really well, and when you pop a belt round them, it'll find your natural waistline and it'll look fine and it'll fit, or you can wear them without, depends on how you feel. So I bought this fabric a couple of years ago. I go to a store in town which does what they call a kilo sale, and all the offcuts from all their fabrics go into these almost like bins, and you can pick out what you want, and they'll sell it to you by the weight. So I will go there once every couple of years. It depends on how much I'm making, really. I haven't been there for a couple of years, and I just go through it, pick out all the fabrics I like, get them all weighed up and bring them all home, and they'll very often last me a year because you get quite a lot of fabric. I can easily spend about £80, but have enough fabric to last me over a year. And if I'm making dresses that are say £30–40 or more each, I make my money back easily. I don't have much left at the moment, and I haven't been making a lot of dresses because the industry's been very stagnant this last year. People have got better things to spend their money on. I was reading an article that said that people are really reining in their luxury spends, and they're buying themselves little treats. And the article said that they were buying specialty coffees and mobile phones. Apparently those are little treats. Anyway, so this is the fabric. It's floral, but it's like a nice stretchy jersey style fabric which will hang really well. This isn't my kind of pattern normally, but as a prototype that I can then put in my shop, that's fine. Now while I'm messing around with this, and I'm going to redraft this first, someone asked about my history on Etsy, what my experiences were on Etsy. So I'm going to talk about that while I'm doing this, because my Etsy history is a bit all over the place. So I started my business when I finished university in 2012, and I went to university to study fashion. What I really wanted to do is to retrain, because before that I had been a self-taught costume designer. So although I was working full-time in offices, evenings and weekends, I was making historical dresses, and I would make them and then try to sell them. The market over here for historical costume is even worse, because people want really nice dresses for 30 quid, and if you're doing a dress properly, it can take weeks to make. They use an awful lot of fabrics. I did a lot of Georgian costume, a lot of Victorian costume, and they take time and effort. So I made a decision in about 2008 that I was going to stop doing the costumes and move over to fashion, but I needed to train properly because I'd never been taught how to pattern cut, how to use an industrial sewing machine. I didn't know how to pattern draft. I couldn't do anything. I'd learned everything from books, and I started making costumes and dresses when I was about 12 at home, and that's how I'd always worked it. So yeah, so I went to uni, came out in 2012, knew that I wanted to run my own business, started that. I got onto an enterprise scheme attached to the university, where I spent a year getting extra training after the uni. So they taught you how to do your accounting, spreadsheets, how to set up a blog, all that kind of stuff. And you got some money to do that. And you would be paid in chunks over the course of a year, provided you attended enough workshops. But it was really, really useful. I mean, I use all my spreadsheets now. I know how to do my accounting, self-assessment, all that sort of thing. So it's been really handy in that respect. So when I ended my costume business, I had a ton of stuff. I had rails full of historical costumes that I'd made, some originals I collected, study pieces, and it had to go. So I joined Etsy, and I basically used it in 2012 to sell everything. And most of it went to Australia, funnily enough, because abroad they're really into their dress up historical reenactment, whereas over here it tends to be people who are so you get people who do soldiers, knights, jousting, that sort of thing. And for the women, because I tended to focus on women's costume, the women would be villagers, serfs. So they weren't in posh costumes. They were making their own stuff out of cheap, cheerful fabrics. So there was no need for me. It wasn't worth my effort. So that's why I transitioned from costume to fashion. I need to cut myself a length of pattern paper, because I do everything on paper. I don't do any designing on computer. A roll like this will last me years. So I'm just going to cut some off so that I can redraft this into a longer What I might do is just graft an extra piece on that I can stick on separately. That might work. That'll save me some paper and some time. We'll give that a go. Just need to do some measurements now. So yeah, so when I had completed all of the sales, I got rid of everything that I needed to get rid of. Then my Etsy store kind of sat there not doing anything. When I started my business, I wasn't really making stuff. I was mostly being a stylist, and whilst I was selling all the costumes, we were using them in photo shoots. So while I was at uni, I had latched on to the photography department, and there was always one student who was an aspiring fashion photographer, and I would latch on to them. And where in the town where I was studying, there were always aspiring models, so there were always people looking to build portfolios. So it was easy to collaborate with people, and we would do studio shoots, some really nice stuff, and also go out and shoot in the area. Lots of great places to shoot in the area at the time as well. So I spent most of my years after university styling photo shoots. And then in 2015, that's when I moved up to the northwest. And I got myself a studio, so I had more space. And I wasn't doing the costume by then. I was well into making fashion dresses, more up to date, more contemporary stuff. So I moved up. About a year later, I bought a semi-industrial sewing machine, which is the one that I use now, from a sewing cooperative. Really, really cheap. It's been an absolutely fabulous machine. Still have it now. And I was a little factory unit. And although I was making dresses, I was generally making them for photo shoots. And then I would put the odd one on Etsy. There wasn't much going on. I would sell them to people I knew. I was doing a lot of bridal commissions, altering bridesmaids' dresses, things like that. And then I got the job part managing the building that I had my studio in, so I didn't need the work. So I was enjoying I had enough money, I had enough income, and I was just playing around, enjoying building my portfolio, which means I've got a good body of work which shows what I can do, and that was fine. That was fine until 2018, when the owners of the building sold up and the building got bought out by a property developer, and basically in the April I had got this flat, and by October I'd lost the studio, I'd lost the job, and I was here. It happened like that. It was so fast, and I was here. So I was starting again from scratch, but I had all this stock. So that's when I started to populate my Etsy store. It was really in October 2018. So I'll show you a graph on here now. It shows that the traction and the original selling of the costume, and then nothing happens, and then suddenly I'm selling on Etsy, and suddenly it went from not being something I needed to being my only income stream. And it really went from everything to nothing, and then wow, I've got to start here from scratch. So that's what I've been doing, and ever since then it's been a case of cultivating my Etsy store, building on that, selling the costume, and then of course selling the costume, selling the clothes that I'm making, and then of course the pandemic happened, and by then I had been taken on by another mentoring scheme that was based up here. It was a pilot scheme, so I had a mentor to help me with ideas, and it was really timely because we were in lockdown. I was a bit lost about how I was going to sell clothes in lockdown. Everything was cancelled, no one was doing anything. And this trend started where people were stuck at home, their jobs were closed, no one could go out, and people were self-entertaining, and crafting was one of the things that they did. And as well as making stuff, I had a huge stash of fabrics and zips and buttons and all sorts of other crafting materials, a lot of which had been donated to me by other people who were having clear outs or closed down their own businesses, and a lot of it wasn't stuff I used. I don't tend to use zips and things like that, but I had boxes and boxes of them. So I started listing everything on Etsy during the lockdowns and had my best year ever for sales. The crafting stuff just flew out the shop, and I was selling it everywhere. So that became a really important diversion in my business, and it's something that I still do. I still have lots of craft items in my Etsy store. And one of the other things I started to do was I always kept all the scraps, the leftover scraps from my dresses. I'd never just throw stuff away because I don't want things to go into landfill. And I started to get all the scraps, so sometimes they were quite long pieces, and I was cutting them into strips and braiding them into coasters and placemats, display mats for tables and things. And that's become another really important part of my business, so I still do that. So every time I make a dress and I've got the fabric left over, I will turn it into a coaster and list it. So whatever's left after I finish this will be braided up and turned into coasters and display mats and all sorts of things. So that was a really good thing that happened as well. Now, I've continued on Etsy, but it's not an easy place to sell. For a start, it's e-commerce, so you are not in control. One of the problems with being on Etsy is that you are a third party, and Etsy is the boss. And if Etsy decide that they are going to change something, they're going to change the algorithm. If they decide that what you sell isn't the sort of thing they want to sell, they can shut you down. It's very vulnerable, and lots of people have had gripes with Etsy for years about it as a platform. So if you just want a little bit of pocket money and you're a crafter or you sell supplies, then great, it may well work for you, but it has definitely had some problems. And one of the problems is that Etsy is a business. It's in the business of making money. It makes money from each listing that you put on. It makes money when you sell something. So they have been opening up their categories to more and more people, and unfortunately they don't police it very well. So what we've ended up with is a site that is plagued with fake goods, drop shippers, and lots of very non-handmade stuff. And it's really hard to make a living where you're constantly being undercut by businesses that shouldn't be on there. So that causes a lot of problems. And I started to feel quite vulnerable that, well, what happens if Etsy decides to shut? If something happens, let's say something happens and the whole place shuts down, or they decide that I violated the rules and they shut my shop down, or anything like that really. And I have been thinking for a while about setting up my own website. And so last year, in March, I opened up a Shopify store. And I have been allowing a lot of my Etsy listings to expire. And I've just been keeping everything on my Shopify store, and keeping like all the clothes and the jewellery and the coasters are on the Shopify store, but I keep a small selection of items plus all the haberdashery on Etsy. Although I feel more secure in terms of if something happens to Etsy, it's not all lost because I have somewhere else to sell. I probably picked a really bad time to start a website because we are now in a cost of living crisis, and the downturn in sales has been marked, and you can see it here in my Etsy charts, but it's everywhere. And this is why I have ended up doing more side hustles. But I've had to diversify because times are tough. Times are very tough. But instead of worrying about it, because there's only so much I can do, I have opted to keep enjoying what I do, which is the crafting. And work on my other side hustles. So I have the cleaning job, I have the YouTube, I have the vintage sales, and all the savings interest, all the other little bits and pieces. And that will get me through. And the good thing about the way I run my business is that because I'm working from home, it doesn't cost me anything. I've got no rent, no business rates. It's very cheap to run. So it's always in profit. I always make enough for it to pay its bills. But it's kind of been downgraded from a part-time business to now a hobby because I'm coasting at the moment. That's fine. You know, I don't mind that. I don't have a problem because it's all about just making enough money to survive. And it doesn't stop me still enjoying making stuff like I am today. This is still my craft. And I like that I can do a bit of this, go and do a bit of YouTube. I will go out and do the cleaning work, so that'll get me out of the house several times a week. And I enjoy that hustling lifestyle. That works. For some reason, I get a buzz from it. I enjoy it. Etsy, certainly I didn't join Etsy until way after its heyday. If you're planning on being an Etsy seller, don't do it because you think you're going to make loads of money. If you happen to be a crafter and you make stuff and you're looking for a new outlet, go for it. It's a lot cheaper than trying to sell at a sticks and bricks market or in a store. It comes with the lack of hassle, and it's easy to set up as well. And of course you get protections from eBay, from Etsy. There's payment protections. If you sell abroad, it works out all the overseas taxes for you, which is one really good advantage. If you do sell overseas, it'll do all those conversions and claim all those taxes on your behalf, so you don't need to worry about it, because that's so complicated. Yeah, so that's really my Etsy journey. It's been very hit and miss. It's always been there as a little bit of a lifeline, and like all the side hustles, it's just another way of making a few quid. But I certainly wouldn't say that it's a major income stream anymore. I hope it's been, I don't even think this has been a useful talk, but it's been my personal experience. As I say, I wouldn't be selling there if I was relying on the money, if I really needed the money. But if I'm a crafter anyway, and I'm producing stuff, maybe just for fun, maybe you knit because you like knitting, maybe you make resin jewellery because you like making resin jewellery, and then you have all these things and you don't know what to do with them, sell them. Why not? If you're making handmade, or you know, you deal in art supplies, crafting supplies, you'll probably do okay. I'd be very careful about selling vintage, and don't be a reseller. Don't infringe on copyright or trademarks, because they are always watching. The big companies are always scanning places like Etsy and closing shops down. And Etsy is starting to pull up its socks on this now, because it's realised that it hasn't got a great reputation when it comes to dealing with trademark infringements. And there are a lot of sellers out there who are ripping other people off. And it's got to get tougher at that, and it isn't. And I think that it's now realising it has to change. So watch this space. So yeah, so that's my Etsy journey really. I think that I'll put up the little graphs and things you've already seen, which give an idea of how up and down things have been, and how what goes on in the economy and in the world really does have an effect. And it teaches you how to get good at negotiating your way through stuff, how to pivot, how to quickly change what you do. I'm lucky because I run a very small business from home. I can change the way I do things very quickly. I don't have staff to worry about. I don't have a business premises to worry about. During the lockdowns, I kept on working. In fact, I was busier than I'd ever been. So the lockdowns for me felt like a good thing. I had a captive audience. I was making money. What can I say? I was one of the people who did make money, and lots of people did make money during the lockdowns. And they were often small businesses, or businesses that were small enough that they could find completely different ways to work. Like small, small breweries who could suddenly do home delivery, and anyone who could class themselves as an emergency service. So anyone who was supplying people with food, with drink. The post office was still open, delivery services were still running. So like me selling online, I could still go down to the post office and send stuff. And of course now we have things like InPost lockers, so you could keep selling if you were like selling on Vinted and things like that. It's about thinking on your feet, and I think going forward, generally, if you are a small business, it is about thinking on your feet and changing with the market, finding the gaps, and being able to diversify in whatever way you need to just keep making money. It's as simple as that. The bottom line right now is, are you making enough to live on? And it almost doesn't matter where it comes from. I had a better year last year. This year looks like it'll be an even better year. And that's just because I think on my feet, and I like to hustle. I like the side hustles. I like to do things a bit differently, and that is keeping me in enough money. I mean, I don't need much money to live on. I like my frugal life, and that's all I need to fund at the moment. So yeah, that's the lot. That's my waffle over with. I didn't have much direction when I was planning to do this post, and as you can probably tell, I kind of lost my way a few times trying to recount 12 years into one post is quite tricky actually. But anyway, I hope this has been of some interest. Do post comments and questions if you have any. I'm always willing to answer interesting questions. And I'm going to carry on drafting this pattern, and we will see how we get on with that. Yeah, that's it. What more can I say? Catch you later.